A few years ago, the Hollywood blockbuster Assassin's Creed, based on the mega popular video game series Assassin's Creed, was released worldwide. The movie turned out to be mediocre and was a box office flop. But we're not interested in the artistic merits of this film, but rather its main characters, the members of the mysterious Assassin Brotherhood, a secret organization of spies and cold-blooded killers. In the film, their main antagonists are the Spanish Inquisition and members of another legendary organization, the Order of the Templars. It seems that the average Westerner has had enough of mysterious ninjas, Shaolin monks, and other Eastern exotica, so they wanted a new toy. The mass culture profiteers sensed this instantly, and voila, a new one appeared on the scene, a new character. Assassin. The truth is, the problem is that his image, shaped by movies and games, has nothing to do with real history. In this episode, we will talk about the real history of the Order of Assassins and its founder, Hasan ibn Sabbah, also known as the Old Man of the Mountain. You will learn how the real assassins lived, trained, and fought, who their enemies were, and whom they considered their sons. But most importantly, we will dispel the common myths that have formed around the assassins over the past 10 centuries. My name is Semyon, and I declare the How They Lived section open. Let's begin. Where did the assassins come from? I want to start my story with a little dive into the past, because without this, it will be difficult to understand the issue. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, a major split occurred in the Islamic world, dividing Muslims into two branches. Sunnis, the events for today's assassins are not too important. You could say that one of the main reasons was the banal struggle for power. So where did the assassins come from? Where did the assassins come from? Allies of the assassins. You could only say that one of the main reasons was the banal struggle for power. However, that was not the end of it. From Shiism emerged a powerful Ismaili movement. Even today, it remains a numerous and very passionate branch of Islam. And in the 10th century, the Ismailis created the Fatimid Caliphate, which controlled vast territories in the Middle East and Africa. At one time, even the cities sacred to Muslims, Mecca and Medina, were part of it. In the 11th century, a split occurred among the Ismailis themselves. From them emerged the Nizari branch, which will play the main role in our story. It was at this moment that Hasan ibn Sabbah entered the historical scene. The very same Old Man of the Mountain, the spiritual leader of the Nizaris, and in fact the founder of the sect of assassins. It all began when Hasan ibn Sabbah, together with a group of his followers, seized the fortress of Alamut in western Persia, turning it into his headquarters. This was done without exhausting sieges or bloody assaults. He simply converted the garrison to the Nizari faith. They also took several more fortresses in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon without a single shot, essentially creating their own state in the Middle East. And the Old Man of the Mountain proved himself not only to be a skilled strategist, but also a charismatic leader whom people were eager to follow. And besides, Sabbah himself apparently truly believed in everything he preached. Modern historians believe that in the territories under his control, Sabbah built a kind of totalitarian socialism with an Islamic twist. He established the strictest order. Any displays of luxury, alcohol, feasts, and promiscuous interaction with the opposite sex were banned. The slightest violation was punished by exile or even death. They say that Sabbah ordered his own son to be executed just for tasting wine. At the same time, the Old Man of the Mountain was quite well educated. In Alamut, he gathered an excellent library. Famous scholars, doctors, and philosophers would visit him. The fortress itself was protected by an excellent system of fortifications, which, according to modern experts, was centuries ahead of its time. However, even the best fortress walls are useless without a garrison. But this was exactly where Sabbah had serious problems. The Old Man of the Mountain simply didn't have enough people to create a proper army, so he chose a different path. And this is where we get to the most interesting part of the story. To the creation of the Order of Assassins, Hasan ibn Sabbah never fought pitched battles against his enemies. Instead, he sent them suicide assassins who, after completing their missions, went to be tortured and then to the scaffold with a smile. Such tactics turned out to be quite effective. Neighboring rulers tried not to get involved with the old man of the mountain so as not to get a poisoned dagger in the back. Especially since there was nothing much to take from the assassins, they lived ascetically. By the way, the name of the sect first appeared in 1122 in the writings of a Persian caliph. But I'll tell you more about this a little later. In that same century, crusaders appeared in the Middle East and established several kingdoms here. At that time, Europeans also met Hasan ibn Sabbah and his assassins. The relationship between them was complicated. Sometimes they were openly hostile, and other times they formed temporary alliances against common enemies. The founder of the Order of Assassins, Hasan ibn Sabbah, died in 1124 at the age of 73. The state he created outlived its founder by 134 years. In 1250, the Mongols invaded Persia, and in 1256, Alamut fell. Wow. Assassins, Truth and Myths. Few subjects are surrounded by as many legends and outright fabrications as the history of the Order of Assassins. Some of them were born centuries ago, but most appeared in recent decades. I will try to dispel the most common myths and tell you who the followers of the Old Man of the Mountain really were. About the Paradise Gardens, or what the assassins smoked. The assassins. Let's start perhaps with the name assassin, because it entered many European languages almost unchanged, where it means a hired killer, a hitman. Until recently, it was believed that the word assassin came from the Arabic hashishin, which translates as user of hashish. This version was supported by 19th century scholars who were the first to study the phenomenon of the Old Man of the Mountain and his order. Why did hired assassins need hashish, you may ask? According to the most famous myth about the assassins, it played a key role in recruiting new members to the order. Supposedly, the candidate was given the drug, and then, while unconscious, was taken to a paradise garden that had been carefully built in Alamut. There, the future assassin was greeted by beautiful houri maidens and abundant feasts. And after waking up, he was told that he had been to paradise and would definitely return there after death, if, of course, he followed the instructions exactly, to carry out the orders of Hasan ibn Sabbah. The visions of paradise were so tempting that the assassins not only lost their fear of death, but on the contrary, longed for it to come so they could return to the heavenly palaces as soon as possible. The first to tell this tale was Marco Polo, who really did travel through the Middle East and probably met the assassins during his journeys. However, the famous Italian was quite the storyteller. He even claimed to have met people with dog heads, so his stories should be taken with a grain of salt. In reality, there simply wasn't enough space in Alamut for paradise gardens. It would have been impossible to fit an entire paradise garden in there. And archaeologists who have thoroughly studied the ruins of the assassins' headquarters haven't found any traces of such structures. In reality, the legend about Hashish and the paradise gardens was most likely needed to explain the truly dog-like loyalty of the assassins to their leader. However, it seems to me that things are much simpler here. The answer lies in the very philosophy of Islam, especially its Shia branch. For Muslims and for a Shia Muslim, the Imam is his protector on Judgment Day, the messenger of the Almighty on earth, whose word is sacred. According to another version, the assassins needed drugs to not fear death, to increase aggression, and to better endure pain. It all seems logical, but hashish actually works differently. Taking this drug relaxes a person, impairs their coordination and attention, and regular use of hashish destroys the nervous system and turns a person into a wreck. Most likely there was some confusion here at first. Many modern scholars believe that the name assassin comes from the Arabic word hashia, which means a ragamuffin, commoner, or non-believer. Most likely that's what the Shiites called the Nizari heretics, the followers of Hasan ibn Sabbah. And the incorrect interpretation of the name led to the birth of a myth, which was further embellished with extravagant tales by medieval European travelers. The assassins themselves never called themselves that. They called themselves the Fidayin, those who sacrificed themselves for the faith. How did the assassins train? The second myth is related to the selection and training of the assassins. It says that becoming an assassin was really not easy. They only accepted young men between the ages of 12 and 20, and even then, not everyone was chosen. A candidate had to show perseverance, living near the castle gates for weeks or even months. Supposedly, this was how the old man of the mountain weeded out the uncertain and faint-hearted. And only those who passed the tests were accepted as apprentices. The training process itself was also quite harsh. The future assassins were subjected to brutal hazing, enduring all sorts of humiliation and abuse. Basically, just like in Hollywood movies. At the same time, however, a student could always leave Alamut and return to his previous life. As for the actual training of future warriors, it was simple. They turned young men into perfect warriors. They were taught hand-to-hand combat, how to use any kind of weapon, introduced to poisons, and trained in acting and the art of disguise. The assassin training course took years, but in the end, he became a true killing machine. In reality, we don't know how assassins were selected or trained, or if such a process even existed. There are no historical documents, no accounts from contemporaries, and no archaeological evidence on this matter, and everything said earlier. This is the product of the imagination of screenwriters and writers. In reality, assassins were hardly trained and skilled fighters. This statement is a result of simple logic. Their high effectiveness was primarily due to their suicidal tactics. To strike without caring about their own life. Most likely they were disposable soldiers, so why spend time and resources training such a fighter? It's much easier to find a new one. Assassins, dart throwers, and spring-loaded blades. In computer games, assassins are always armed with the latest technology. They have all sorts of gadgets. Telescopic blades, miniature crossbows, pistols, muskets, and even Gatling guns. Of course, all of this is nonsense. In the 11th and 12th centuries, when assassins actually existed, good weapons were scarce and very expensive. Not to mention all sorts of technical innovations, which were only available to the high nobility. And why spend money on weapons for a disposable fighter, if his very first mission is most likely going to be his last? In reality, things were much more boring. Assassins most often attacked their victims with ordinary knives. Besides saving on equipment, there was another reason for this. A person armed with a sword or other serious weapon could hardly approach a count or a caliph calmly. He would inevitably arouse suspicion among the guards, since in those troubled times any important person had them. But an ordinary knife hung from the belt of literally everyone, even the poorest beggars. For example, that's how Margrave Conrad of Montferrat died, one of the most famous victims of the assassins. Two assassins in Ravagna who looked like monks approached him in broad daylight and stabbed him with daggers. The Margrave's bodyguards killed one of the assassins and captured the other, but by then, it didn't matter anymore. Just like that, plain and simple, without any rooftop chases or acrobatic leaps. The terror of Europe and Asia. Another myth about the assassins says that they had literally everyone terrified. From Spain to China, rulers trembled at the mention of the old man of the mountain and his elusive fighters. In reality, they didn't tremble because they simply had no idea of their existence. The assassins operated exclusively in their own region. Europe, and even more so China or India, simply didn't interest them. Now, a few words on the assassin's effectiveness. I'll say right away, it's not impressive. During the existence of the order, its Fidayin killed 3 caliphs, 6 viziers, and several dozen local nobles and religious figures who, in one way or another, crossed the path of the master of Alamut. At the hands of an assassin fell the Margrave, Conrad of Montferrat, and the King of Jerusalem, as well as the famous Persian scholar Abu al-Mahassin, who harshly criticized the Nizaris. But the legendary Saladin, whom the assassins truly hunted, survived. However, after 3 assassination attempts, he left Alamut alone. In total, the assassins eliminated 93 people, losing 118 fidayeen in the process. Not exactly the perfect killers, right? Assassins and Templars. Any gamer will tell you that the main enemy of the assassins is the Templars. However, in reality, the fidayeen, the old men of the mountain, did not fight against the Crusaders. At a certain point, they were even allies, acting together against common enemies like Saladin. Or European rulers would hire the assassins to eliminate their political opponents. I already mentioned the assassination of Margrave Conrad of Montferrat. So, the captured assassin confessed under torture that the person who ordered the hit was none other than the famous Richard the Lionheart. You might call that a medieval political mystery. But to be fair, under torture, people will say anything. Instead of an epilogue, subtitles. So where did the legend of the assassins come from? It was undoubtedly started by the Crusaders who returned to Europe from the Holy Land. Mentions of the terrifying Muslim killers can be found in the works of many medieval scholars. For example, Burchard of Strasbourg, Jacques D. Vitry, Arnold of Lübeck. By the way, the latter is the first to tell readers about the mass use of hashish by the assassins. It should also be added that Europeans often received information about the assassins from their enemies, the Sunni Muslims. So it's unnecessary to talk about any objectivity here. And then, for many centuries, Europeans left the Middle East, and contact with the Muslim world was almost completely lost. But the legend remained, and time acted on it like it does on fine wine. With each passing year, its bouquet became richer and more refined. In Europe, people generally loved stories about the mysterious East, where anything could happen. The famous traveler and spinner of tall tales Marco Polo added fuel to the fire. Thanks to him, paradise gardens with houris appeared in Alamut, and the castle itself turned into some kind of drug den. However, even he, compared to modern pop culture figures, is like a real child, naive and sincere. Because what is told about the assassins today has absolutely nothing to do with reality. Goodbye, everyone.